Jealousy might be the most honest emotion you have, not because it's noble, but because it never lies about what you secretly want. You've felt it, that quiet burn when someone else gets what you've been working toward. Here's what changes after the next few minutes. You'll stop fighting that feeling and start reading it like a map. Because buried inside every flash of jealousy is a precise signal about your own desires, your own worth, your own unfinished business. And once you learn to read it that way, it stops being a poison. It becomes a teacher. Let's begin. It was dusk. Soft orange light poured across the Indian earth. A gentle wind moved through the grass, and distant trees rustled with a quiet whisper. Not far from a village, a group of students had gathered and sat in silence. The air that evening felt heavy somehow, thick with something unspoken. No one was saying a word, and yet it wasn't a peaceful silence. It felt more like the kind of quiet that comes when people are holding something inside. The human heart is a strange thing. Even in the middle of a calm and beautiful landscape, a storm can be raging within. Sometimes just catching a glimpse of the person sitting beside you is enough to send a ripple through your chest. On that particular evening, a young student sat with his eyes closed, and behind those closed eyes, a face kept appearing. The face of someone he had always believed was more gifted than himself. Every time that face surfaced, his jaw would tighten just slightly, the way a fist closes around something it refuses to let go. He had smiled at this person that very morning, offered him water, asked about his health, and yet here in the dark behind his eyelids, something older and quieter was doing its own work. What I'm about to share comes from an ancient text called the Dhammapada, and from the human story behind one of its most celebrated teachings. The Dhammapada is something like a collection of poems, 423 short verses, each one speaking directly to the depths of the human heart. It is believed to contain the Buddha's own words. Among those verses there is this: "The mind leads all things. The mind is their master. When someone speaks or acts from a clouded mind, suffering follows, just as a wheel follows the hoof of an ox." They say this verse was born from one particular story. Among the Buddhist students, there was a man known for his extraordinary dedication. He rose earlier than anyone else. He listened to the teachings more carefully than anyone else. He poured himself into his practice with a sincerity that few could match. But then, one day, something happened. He witnessed another student, someone who had only been training for a short time, receive a warm and personal word of encouragement from the Buddha himself. There had been a moment of sudden understanding in this newer student, and the Buddha had noticed it, eyes softening, voice gentle. Something stirred in the dedicated man's chest. Why him? I have been here longer. I have worked harder. I have given so much more. At first it was small, just a splinter of feeling, but over the days that followed, it quietly spread. During meals, while reading the teachings, even as he tried to sleep, that image kept returning. Finally, he went to the Buddha. "Teacher, I want to be honest with you. I've practiced for a long time, but my heart won't clear. Every time I see someone else being recognized, something stirs inside me. I don't know what this is." The Buddha looked at him steadily, not with judgment, not with surprise, just receiving his words exactly as they were. After a moment, the Buddha spoke. "Are you feeling that stirring right now?" The man nodded. "Yes, even now." "Then don't look away from it. Simply notice. I am jealous right now, just that, just noticing." The man was confused, not trying to make it go away, just watching it. "Yes," said the Buddha. "The mind is the master, but when the mind is clouded, a person acts from within that cloudiness without ever knowing it's there. First, notice, see it clearly. That is where everything begins." That night the man tried. When jealousy arose, instead of pushing it away, he simply watched. It was harder than he expected. The moment he tried to observe the feeling, his mind was already somewhere else, making excuses, placing blame. "It's his fault. It's the circumstances. I deserve more than this." But after several days, something shifted. One morning, when jealousy arose, he caught it. Just for an instant. Ah, there it is again. And in that single moment of recognition, the tiniest gap opened between the feeling and himself. It was a small thing. But inside that gap, something was waiting. The possibility of change. That is what the Dhammapada was pointing toward all along. He began to understand that this gap, this brief pause between feeling and reaction, was not emptiness, but spaciousness, like the moment between a match being struck and a fire catching. Everything depended on what happened there. And slowly, without forcing anything, the jealousy began to lose its grip, not because he had defeated it, but simply because he had finally agreed to look it in the eye. This verse, placed at the very opening of the Dhammapada, is one of the most treasured teachings in all of Buddhism. Let's sit with it a little longer. The mind is the master. In Buddhist thought, most of our suffering doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from how our mind responds to what happens. Someone else being praised is simply a fact. It's just something that occurred. But the moment the mind responds with, "Why not me?" that's where suffering is born. The seed of pain isn't out there in the world. It's inside the mind. And here is where people often misunderstand the teaching. This is not saying that jealousy makes you a bad person. The Buddha never condemned people for feeling jealous. Jealousy is one of the most natural emotions a human being can experience. Wanting what someone else has, that in itself is not wrong. What matters is what happens next, whether we act from within that feeling without ever realizing it's there. What does it look like to not realize it's there? Think about what happens when jealousy rises. We often start quietly tearing the other person down in our minds. They didn't even work that hard. It was just luck. I'm actually better than them. Or we try to bury the feeling entirely. I shouldn't be jealous. What kind of person does that make me? And so we push it away, pretend it wasn't there. But in both cases, we never actually look at the feeling. We never meet it. And because we don't see it, it becomes the master, quietly steering our words, our choices, our relationships. The Dhammapada offers a third way, observation. To observe is not to fix the feeling, not to justify it, just to notice it. Right now, I am feeling this. In Buddhist teaching, this quality of noticing is called sati, often translated as mindfulness or awareness. And something remarkable happens the moment you notice. A small gap appears between you and the feeling. In that gap, for the first time, you have a choice. You're no longer being moved by the feeling without knowing it. You're watching and then deciding. There's one more layer to this teaching that I find quietly beautiful. When you observe jealousy closely, really sit with it, something else begins to emerge from underneath. A wish. I wanted to be seen like that too. A fear. What if I'm never enough? A tenderness. I am still hurting from something I haven't named. Jealousy, it turns out, is a mirror. It reflects back what we most care about, what we most long for. That's why the Buddha didn't call it an enemy. He simply said, look at it. Because looking is the beginning of understanding. And understanding in the Buddhist teaching is not a cold or clinical thing. It is more like a lamp being lit in a dark room. A woman once came to a monastery carrying years of bitterness toward her younger sister, who had married well and been praised by their whole family. The abbess didn't ask her to forgive. She simply said, "Tell me what you wanted." The woman was silent for a long time. Then she wept, not from anger, but from something softer and older than anger. That was the moment the room got a little lighter. So what does this actually look like in our lives today? Let's walk through a few moments that might feel familiar. First, the workplace. A colleague who started at the same time as you gets promoted first. Or you've spent months pouring yourself into a project, only to watch a newer team member's idea get selected instead. In that moment, something spreads quietly through your chest, a feeling you recognize but don't always want to name. When that happens, most of us do one of two things. We scold ourselves. I'm an adult, I shouldn't feel this way. Or we start hoping, somewhere in the background, that the other person won't do so well after all. But the Dhammapada suggests something else. Before either of those responses, just say this quietly to yourself: I'm jealous right now. Just noticing. And in that noticing, something else often comes into view. I want it to be recognized like that. That's not weakness. That's information. It tells you what you care about, what you're reaching toward. And from that place of clarity, you can ask a gentler question. What can I do from where I am right now? Now let's talk about something that's very much a modern version of this feeling. Scrolling. A friend posts photos from a trip, a beautiful restaurant, a stunning view, warm laughter captured in golden light. You look at your own evening. You came home tired, you ate something quick, nothing worth photographing. And that small, heavy feeling as you go to tap the like button, that's real. Social media shows us the highlight reel of other people's lives. The joy of the trip gets posted. The exhaustion on the way home doesn't. The tight budget behind the beautiful dinner is invisible. We know this logically, and still the heart reacts. When it does, try this. I notice I'm unsettled by what I just saw. Then set the phone down and look around at where you actually are. What's in front of you right now? What do you actually have in this moment? Jealousy narrows our vision. Observation opens it back up. And finally, parenthood. Parents often compare their children without meaning to. That child can already do this. Mine still can't. Underneath that comparison is usually a mix of worry, love, and a quiet fear. Am I doing enough? Am I enough? Here too, the practice is the same. Notice the comparing. I'm measuring right now. And from that noticing, it becomes possible to shift the question from how does my child measure up to where is my child right now, today? When the fog of comparison lifts even slightly, the child in front of you comes back into focus, because in that moment, you might catch something you nearly missed. A small thing they figured out on their own this week, a way they laughed at dinner, the particular way they come looking for you when they're tired. A monk once said that envy is like rain on a window. You're so focused on the streaks, you stop seeing the garden outside. So what can you actually do, starting today? Here are 2 simple things. The first is what you might call naming it. The next time jealousy arises, say quietly to yourself, there it is. Not judging it, not acting on it, just giving it a name. Buddhist practitioners have long used this practice, sometimes called labeling, as a way of creating distance between themselves and a feeling. Anger arises, anger. Anxiety rises, anxiety. Jealousy stirs, jealousy. It sounds almost too simple, but something genuinely shifts when you name a feeling. Instead of being the jealousy, you become someone who is noticing it. That quiet shift from I am jealous to there is jealousy here is the gap the Buddha was pointing toward. And it's enough to keep you from being swept away. The second practice is one line in writing. Sometime this evening, think back to a moment when you felt that stirring of envy or jealousy. Then, in a notebook or even on your phone, write just one sentence. I was envious of what? Maybe what I actually wanted was what? For example, I was envious of my colleague being praised. Maybe what I actually wanted was to know that my work matters. Just one line. That's all. You don't need to write a journal entry or analyze yourself. This single sentence can gently illuminate what's living underneath the jealousy. Not to criticize yourself for feeling it, but to understand yourself a little better. The students who sat with the Buddha practiced this kind of observation every single day. No special tools, no special place required. Just this. Tonight, one quiet sentence. And tomorrow, if jealousy arises again, and it likely will, you don't need to feel that you failed. A monk once told his student, the fire that returns is not the same fire. You are not the same person who watches it. Each time you name it, each time you write that one line, you are laying down a stone on a path that slowly, quietly leads somewhere different. Before we close, I want to leave you with just one question. The last time you felt envious of someone, what was hiding underneath that feeling? You don't need to answer right now. There's no hurry. Just let the question rest somewhere in your chest for a while. The answer has a way of arriving quietly when you're not forcing it. Maybe you're washing dishes or walking to your car, and something small shifts, and suddenly you see it clearly. Beneath the envy was a longing you hadn't let yourself admit. A monk I once knew described it like ice finally melting. You didn't cause it to melt, and you couldn't have rushed it. You simply kept the conditions warm enough for it to happen on its own. And perhaps when that moment comes, you won't need to do anything with it at all. Just the seeing itself is enough. A woman in one of our Sangha groups once told me that after sitting with a question like this for 3 weeks, she was folding laundry when she suddenly started to cry. Not from pain, but from a kind of relief, the way you exhale after holding your breath without realizing it. She said she hadn't even remembered the question consciously, but something in her had been quietly working on it the whole time. If observing jealousy brought up something you weren't sure how to hold, we explored how to actually work with that feeling and why it's nothing to be ashamed of in a previous teaching. Today, using the words of the Dhammapada as our guide, we explored what it means to observe jealousy rather than run from it. Jealousy is not something shameful. It is not something that needs to be erased. It is evidence that you care about something, that you want something, that you are still reaching towards something. The fact that your heart stirs means your heart is still alive and moving. The only thing that becomes a problem is when that stirring pulls you under without you ever knowing it. When the feeling becomes the master, and what's right in front of you disappears from view. The Dhammapada says, the mind is the master. And when the mind is clear, when it is being watched, gently, with honesty, jealousy stops being a storm and becomes a mirror. It shows you what you truly want. It shows you what you're still reaching toward. So the next time that familiar stirring comes, see if you can pause, just for one breath, and say, ah, there it is. That's enough. That one small moment of noticing is where everything begins to shift. 2,500 years ago, a student sat in the fading light of an Indian evening and tried to do exactly this. No philosophy degree required, no special technique. He simply looked at what was happening inside him. You have always had that same capacity. Thank you for spending this time here with me today. I hope your days ahead hold a little more ease and a little more compassion for yourself. And if on some days that compassion is nowhere to be found, remember the student in that fading light. He did not always succeed either. Some evenings he sat down, looked within, and was swept away just the same. He came back the next day anyway. That return is the practice. One story a day. Try it. In a week your words will change. In a month your eyes will change. In a year the same world will look completely different.